They hired me for my hands, not my instruments. That was the joke the Ostini crew made the first week. Low murmurs behind translator crackle, before they learned I could hear the joke as clearly as they could. Humans have a name for it, the tactile gap. Their claw tips are built for gripping, not for feeling. Mine carry 400 years of tool and die work packed into an evolution nobody asked for. So when the survey office needed someone to crawl the outer hull of a leased trench runner by hand, in the dark, past the reach of every sensor suite aboard, they came to the humans first. I'd taken the contract for the pay, like every other human working Ostini waters, but I'd stayed for the work itself. There is something almost meditative in running bare fingers over 3 kilometers of hull plating, panel by panel, in a silence so total you can hear your own pulse arguing with the pressure outside the suit. The Ostini crew never understood that part. To them, a hull was a number on a display. To me, it was a surface with a history, and histories leave marks that no drone has ever been built to care about. I'd been 3 months on the Ostini contract when the Arkelet went down in the Vanter Sea, and the Soven went down 11 days later in the Osselin Deep, on the far side of the Kessa Trench that split the two seas like a wound. Both vessels logged clean hulls to the second before they lost pressure. Both crews died in under 4 minutes. The Confederation Tribunal wanted a story that ended at trench pressure, unpredictable, nobody's fault. The insurers wanted the same story faster. I did not want that story. I wanted to put my hand on the actual metal. They let me dive the wreck of the Soven, because by then the trench had already swallowed the Arkelet past any depth the suit could reach, and because refusing me would have looked stranger than allowing me. My handler was an Ostini auditor named Vothril Kades, sent by the Vanter Concordat that insured both ships, silver-gray skin, unhurried patience, the kind that reads as respect until you've been in the business long enough to recognize it as control. The hull scanner drone went first, the way it always did, and came back clean the way it always did. Then I went down myself, sealed into a suit built for a smaller frame than the crew standard, threading a line along the outer plating by hand, section by section, because a scanner reads a surface, and I read a surface too, but I also read the 4 centimeters on either side of whatever the scanner had decided to look at. The Soven's wreck lay canted against a shelf of black rock, lit only by my suit lamps and the faint bioluminescent drift of trench life that had already begun to gather along the seams, the way it always does once a hull stops being warm. I worked my way aft from the bow, one hand always in contact with the plating, the other guiding the line, counting panels under my breath the way I'd counted them on 40 dives before this one. Nothing. 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 The Ostini captain waiting topside asked twice over comms whether I had found anything worth reporting, and twice I told her not yet, because I hadn't, and because I have never once radioed up a guess dressed as a finding. I found it on the 9th panel aft of the aux intake. Not a crack, not corrosion. A cut, clean, straight, the kind of edge that comes from a tool and not from pressure or time or depth. I ran 2 fingers along it before I understood what I was feeling, because my display told me the panel was intact, and had been intact an hour earlier when the drone passed over the same seam. 4 millimeters. I measured it 3 separate times with the calipers clipped to my wrist, because I did not trust the first 2 measurements enough to trust the third, and each time it came back the same. 4 millimeters wide, machined smooth along both edges, running 11 centimeters before it stopped just short of the weld line, just short enough that a scanner reading pressure differentials across that seam would never register it, and just deep enough that at operational depth it would open like a mouth. I did not radio it up. I went back to the airlock, peeled out of the suit, and sat very still in the drying bay until my hands stopped shaking, not from fear, from the particular kind of anger that needs somewhere quiet to go before it can be spoken out loud without breaking something. Vothril Kades met me at the hatch wearing the patient face he wore for everyone. He asked what I'd found. I told him, pristine hull exactly as the drone reported. I watched something behind his eyes settle just slightly, the way a held breath lets go half a centimeter at a time. That was the tell I needed. A man who has genuinely lost 2 ships to an unexplained trench does not relax at pristine. He worries harder. Vothrel exhaled. The tribunal convened 4 days later in the observation dome of the Confederation relay station above the trench, all soft gray light through curved glass, and the low blue murmur of instruments nobody in that room fully trusted anymore, though none of them would have said so out loud. I was not on the agenda. Humans rarely were on Austenite tribunals. I stood at the back with the other contract staff and said nothing while the drone logs were read into record. Clean readings, both ships, no anomaly, conclusion. Trench pressure event, cause undetermined, no fault assigned. I asked to speak. It took the panel chair a long moment to locate the protocol that would even allow it. I did not accuse anyone. I did not need to. I put 4 numbers on the table instead. The panel designation, the cut's width, the cut's length, and its exact distance from the weld seam that let it hide from every scan pass on record. I said I had felt it with my own hand twice, because I did not trust a hand that only checked once. I said the only tool aboard either vessel capable of cutting that precise a groove at that precise, a distance from a stress point, was a fabrication auditor's calibration blade, standard issue. Vothrel himself had told me once, to Vanter Concordat inspectors and no one else aboard either ship. The panel chair asked me, not unkindly, how a human hand could outmeasure equipment built to a tolerance 1,000 times finer than any nerve ending. I said the equipment wasn't wrong. The equipment was doing exactly what it had been told to do, which was look for exactly the kind of damage a trench event produces, and nothing else. A groove machine to sit just outside that search pattern isn't a flaw in the instrument. It's a flaw in trusting the instrument's assumptions instead of the metal itself. I said I hadn't outmeasured anything. I had simply refused to stop checking once I'd been told there was nothing left to check. The room did the thing rooms do when a fact lands that nobody wanted and everybody now has to hold anyway. Vothrel didn't move. He didn't need to. His stillness was the loudest thing in the dome. They found the second blade in his kit 3 hours later, filed down at the tip to match a groove exactly 4 millimeters wide. He'd cut the arculet the same way, timed to the same trench pressure cycle, so that 2 failures 11 days apart would read as one weather pattern instead of 2 murders. The insurance payout on both ships, weighed against a rival Concordat contract he'd been quietly buying into for 2 years, would have covered the rest of his life twice over, and buried 2 crews under a phrase nobody would ever think to question again. Nobody thanked me in the room. That isn't how the Austenite do it, and I'd stopped expecting it months earlier. But Vothrel's replacement, a younger auditor with none of the practice patience, found me before I left the dome and asked how I'd known to distrust a clean reading in the first place, when every instrument aboard had agreed with itself. I told her the truth. A scanner tells you what it was built to look for. My hand doesn't know what it's supposed to find. It only tells me what's actually there, whether that's what anyone wanted or not. I still dive every hull they hand me the same way now, fingers first, drone second, because I have never once caught a lie with an instrument that was built by the same people it was meant to catch. 4 millimeters wide, felt before it was ever seen. That was the whole of it. Nothing more complicated than a human being willing to keep checking with her own hands after the machine had already said stop looking.